My name is Stephanie Rose. My pronouns are she and her, and my gender identity is transgender. It has ended a war that was going on in my body for most of my life. It has brought me peace in my body mainly, and in my identity. It solved a lot of problems for me that I didn't know how to solve before. Depends on how you define transitioning. Now, if you're talking about like name change, surgery, hormones, actually using, identifying to the world, that's only been within the last 5 years. When I was younger, there was nothing. If there was, nobody talked about it. And so I struggled with a lot of things that I had no idea what to do with, no framework to deal with those things, because it just wasn't there. Maybe it was somewhere, but it wasn't for me. And so I didn't really understand what was going on within me. I knew that I didn't fit in, and I knew there was something really wrong, but I didn't know what or how. And it wasn't until much later that I started to figure it out. I was figuring it out for like 25 years, from when I started to when I actually, okay, this is what I need to do about this, And so yeah, there wasn't any role models. If there were, I didn't know about them, and it wasn't until later I saw the movie The Crying Game, and in fact, my daughter's boyfriend, that was the first video, and this was when there were videos, that I ever bought, and he commented, "That's kind of strange that that's the first video you've ever bought." But I really resonated with that movie, and I think that was probably the first role model or understanding that I really had. I kind of had an idea, but not really. I can identify with a lot of the stories, but it also just normalizes it for me a whole lot. And it feels safer. It's like, okay, this isn't quite as dangerous as it might have been, because there's a lot of people out there. And also just recognizing that this is okay. First support I really got was wasn't actually out. I was experimenting with clothing. And this is a really weird story, but I'll go ahead and tell you. I was visiting my mom, and I was probably in my 30s or 40s. And my mom had been a nurse, and she'd been a psychiatric nurse, so she'd seen a lot of stuff. And she knew I was experimenting with clothing. And this is going to sound really weird, but on the visit, she gave me some of her underwear. And it was kind of like saying to me, this is okay, in the way that she could. It was very meaningful to me, but also very personal. But it just told me my mom knew I was okay. As far as other support, I've had a golden path, really. Family, I've had it so easy. Friends, I've only really had one bad confrontation with a friend, and that was via emails even. So, and I've had a few friends say, well, I really can't support this. And then I have some friends who just can't bring themselves to use the name Stephanie, so they call me Steph. Um, but generally speaking, it's been really a golden path. I have two daughters, one that I live with, one that lives in out of state. And when I told her, she had a rough time with it, and a lot because she was worried that I was going to get attacked and other things. My therapist said, she's on her own journey. You have to just give her the space. And so I did. And she was the daughter who was concerned with me using my name because she said, I don't, you're going to get hurt, and so and she celebrated Pride last year, it's like for me, she celebrated Pride. So that was pretty cool. But she's pretty much come around, I think both my kids have struggled with it, but they haven't ever rejected me or rejected it. They've always known that I love them, and I've always known that they love me. That there are hard times, but yeah, it's been I have had it, and I've been told this too. I've had it incredibly easy as far as I'm sure some days probably somebody's going to come up and punch me or something, but right now, even my friends, even people that had no clue, I had to educate them a little bit, but actually they were kind of thankful for the education. So well, I approach it with anybody, whether it's family, friends, or even just acquaintances. I'm very open, maybe too open. I'm willing to answer just about any questions they ask of me. I also, and this is not something that all transgender people do, I don't push it on them. It's like, okay, so you didn't get the name right or the pronoun right, and then a lot of times they'll call me by the wrong pronoun or the wrong name, because a lot of my friends knew me before, and then they'll say, oh, I'm sorry, and I said, I just appreciate that you try, and I don't know it's just like I know who I am, and so it's okay if they don't quite get it, but I've had people say, you're the first transgender person I've ever known, and thank you, because I kind of get it more because you've explained it to me. That's been a reaction common amongst people I know. There's been there's been some education. I had my cardiologist, I kind of had to educate him because it was like he didn't understand it at all. But I had to get his okay because I was, changing medications and stuff. And so it was like, he said, like, well, wait a minute, because he's known me for like 30 years. It's like, you have kids. What's this? And so I had to kind of explain it. He's fine with it now. He calls me by my name and everything. So, and there's been people along the way that they don't exactly get it and they struggle with it. And I'm just patient with them, allowing them the space to figure it out for themselves. And I figure to get what I want, if I ease into it slowly and am nice, I'll probably get it, rather than I'm just not a big confrontive person. I don't demand from anybody. So it's just who I am. Well, everybody's on their own journey. So, I need to allow that. I'm on my journey, they're on their journey, and, I need to allow space for that. I was raised, my parents weren't bigots, but they were fundamentalist Christians. And I was raised pretty much like in Baptist churches and stuff all my life. And I believe that. I still believe in God. But I was raised in that environment. But they weren't terribly closed-minded. But the church, however, is a little bit more stiff. Before I came out, this was recently now, I was going to a church, and I had just started there a year or two before I came out, and I was on this path, but I hadn't really told anybody, and I wasn't flamboyant. I didn't dress. I shouldn't kind of dressed down when I went to church, and because I liked church, but I knew I needed some spiritual guidance. And so I went and I talked to the pastor, just him and me. And we talked it all over, and I kind of had to educate him too. And one of the things I needed from him, I asked him for anyways, do you know any other transgender Christians to help me along this path? Because it's a difficult path to navigate. He didn't, but at the first meeting, he closed it with, thank you for letting me on this journey with you. And subsequently, we had other meetings as I took steps like hormones and surgery and all those things. I never came out at that church because it was a very conservative church. And the reason was, it wasn't really that there was necessarily anything wrong with the church. I could not reconcile my own anxiety being in church, what it would happen, because I've been in church long enough to know that this could be a real problem, not just for me, but for the pastor. And I didn't give people the opportunity to be educated because my own anxiety just said, nah, I'm not going to do that. And I could never reconcile that. So I ended up leaving that church. At the time, this was just before the pandemic started. So I was well into transitioning, and who knows, maybe they knew and just didn't say, because I mean, obviously, it's kind of showing. But I'd seen Buttigieg on an interview when we were still running for president, and he was talking about his faith, and he was Episcopal. So I thought, maybe I could go to Episcopal church. So I found there was an Episcopal church in the neighborhood. I went by, talked to the pastor, and I said, look, this is a situation. This is who I am. This is what I'm about. He said, yeah, fine. You're okay here. Then the lockdown started. So I started Zooming the church. And then I decided, okay, I want to get more connected. So I went down and I talked to the pastor again. And I said, I want to get more. What do I have to do to get more connected in the church? And so we talked about things. And we talked about baptism. And he said, well, we like for people to be baptized. And then, well, I've already been baptized. Oh, so okay. So, but then I said, I've never been baptized to Stephanie. And he said, that's a good idea. So I've been baptized as Stephanie. Now, we had the baptism service. I invited as many friends. It was all outside and, social distancing, but it was totally cool. And it was just like, because of the struggle of the conflict within my head of this fundamentalist Christian banging around there, it brought who I am into alignment with my faith in a really nice way. Also, in this period of time, I went from thinking that I had to perform for God or anybody else. And this was fundamental to my transition, because up to this time, I'd just been performing. I was like, I have to be a man for my wife or family or whatever, I got to do this, and I was performing. And I realized I don't have to do that with God, because God loves me. And before, I was kind of like, if I step out of line, God's going to squish me with a hammer. But I came to the point where I realized that God loves me, which allowed me to stop performing. When I stopped performing, it allowed me to be myself. And that's when I could transition. Once I reached that point of recognizing God loves me for who I am, not for how I perform or expectations of anybody else, whoever it is, it freed me up to be myself and to continue on with my relationship with God, and to transition. Win-win. It's interesting because, like I say, I did transition later. So I'm kind of pretty sure I'm going to be transitioning the rest of my life. I don't think I'm going to get there. And the with the quarantine, it's actually had the effect that I've been able to experiment with things like clothing and stuff like that I was too afraid to before. And because I'm in my house, and so I've gone a whole lot further as far as my outward expression than I had before. I was kind of like androgynous. It was, I knew the clothes were female, but nobody else did. But now it's kind of like, yeah. And so I do it at home, and then I go out like to the grocery store or something, or I do a Zoom meeting, and it's cool. And so I keep moving forward, and I find that clothes that I used to wear, polo shirts, for instance, they were women's polo shirts, but they were polo shirts, and I had a bunch of them because I like to buy clothes. What can I say? But I realized, I really don't want to wear polo shirts anymore. They're too guyish. And so I gave them all to the charity, because I figured, yeah, let somebody else have them, because I'm moving slowly. It's transition. It's not, sometimes I think I wish it was like, okay, boom, we make the decision and we're all the way down. That hasn't been how it's worked. It's been a very slow progression of trying and dipping my toe in the water, a little bit more, a little bit more. So what's next for me is a little bit more. I'm hoping that with this video, or with PFLAG, or whatever, that I can be helpful to other people who are experiencing this. I'm hopeful that I can be helpful to other people who are experiencing trying to navigate Christianity and being transgender, or just being transgender. And that is really my goal as far as what I would like to do. I just want to be a support, normalize, be a friend, whatever, give back. I've been given my life back because of my transition, and I would like to repay that some, because I don't think I would be here had I not transitioned. I was doing horrible stuff to myself. So today I went to a training for the PFLAG Speakers Bureau, and it was just telling my story. And what they do is they send out, like, if a college class or an organization, or say the police department, they just need to know more about the LGBT community. Yeah, then they get their, if PFLAG covers the whole spectrum. Then they have a speakers bureau that they can draw from, and they send these people out on a panel, and they just kind of tell their story, just kind of like I'm doing now. And then they answer questions. It's not like I'm a professional at this. I just know my story and my experience. And that's all they want us to share. Well, it was training in kind of like what to expect, kind of how to do that, what you want to cover, a little bit of practice. And so now the next step is to get more connected in with the Bureau, and then start looking for, they post opportunities, and then you just sign up, and right now everything's on Zoom. So it would be like, okay, so this college class or whatever on maybe human sexuality would like to have some speakers, then they post it, and then whoever wants to signs up, and then they go. So that would be the next step, is to start going and sharing my story. And this is kind of the first time I've done that with you, is sharing that story, and hopefully helping people understand, helping people maybe get rid of some hatred or misunderstanding, or helping those people who don't know about this stuff and need some understanding. There's a whole lot of need for education amongst professional people and amongst everybody else, because part of my problem was the professional people didn't know, didn't understand. Like the doctors, had they seen what I was doing to myself and understood, they would have known and been able to steer me in the right direction. They had no clue. And so, if I can in some way be a friend or educate, that's what I'm looking forward to. Yeah. I guess one thing that I think it's important for transgender people to know, and they probably already know this because I've been told this, is that everybody's experience is different. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's the same. Like, I didn't know when I was a child that I was transgender, but then I didn't have the framework to understand that either. And so my experience has been a lot different than, say, somebody who would transition right now. But that's okay. And how I relate to my transitioning, my identity, who I am, and how I understand that, although there's a lot of similarities, there can be differences, and that's okay. This is my journey, and this is who I am, and that's okay. And it's okay for somebody to have a different journey. For instance, I've transitioned surgically. Some people don't want to do that. That's okay. Some people don't want to do some of the things. For me, it was like, yeah, go for it. Do all I can, but some people don't want to, and that's okay too. And I think that's important, that everybody realizes this is not like we fit into this one little mold category that, well, all transgender people get surgery, or all transgender people are on hormones, and blah, 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 blah. It's not like that. Everybody has their own journey on how they function with this. And another thing along with those lines is, I'm not sure, but I think if you're not transgender, it's really difficult to really understand what's going on inside, because unless you're experiencing it, it's really hard to describe that war in the body of between who I am and who my society or my body says I am. That is hard to understand for, I think, for a cisgender person. I'm not a cisgender person, I don't know, but my perception is that I can educate people, but it's one of those experiential things that I don't think people really get unless they've actually lived it.